Please like, share, and please, if you would subscribe, that will help my channel a lot. Thank you so much. Ring that notification bell too. So, who is BRYAN KOHBERGER? We are going to get into that. So many questions everyone has, including myself. 2 weeks ago, I made a video. Hopefully you checked it out. If not, please go check it out. I talked about someone who was crime obsessed with some of the most famous murders in the country. I was right. We all know of the movie Scream, and that movie was inspired by the killer Danny Rolling, who terrified Gainesville, Florida by killing a bunch of college students. This guy, Ted Bundy, another college student killer, and the famous Amityville horror film, also took place November 13th at 112 Ocean Avenue at 3 a.m., except it was 1974. Let's hear who is BRYAN KOHBERGER of Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, from the people that knew him and from the information we've gathered.
Okay, I don't have many followers, so I'm not sure who this is going to reach out to, but regarding the case of the 4 Idaho students that were slain and the arrest that was made, I used to be friends with BRYAN KOHBERGER during my middle and high school years. And then before anyone comes at me and says that I'm just running for clout, I'm not. I have pictures that I will show you. I have screenshots that I will show you. I have yearbook pictures that I show you. I went to school with the kid. I was friends with him. I wouldn't make something like this up. I am just in absolute shock right now. I was heading to lunch when my mom called me, and immediately I knew something was off because I have the type of family that we don't call each other. So if someone does call someone, we know something's bad. She called me and asked me about the murders. I didn't know where she was going with it until she said that it was BRYAN KOHBERGER, and naturally I freaked out and called about 8 of my friends. My brother was really good friends with him. My other friend Brandon was really good friends with him. I'm gonna have a picture of him with him on the green screen as well. I'm shaking still, but anyway, let me show you. This is Brandon, the one I was just talking about. That's his wife, Brianna, and that's me. This was back in 2017. Obviously, that's BRYAN. Still has the dead face that it's the eyes. I don't know. But when I spoke to him back in 2017, he was clean. He was a heavy heroin user back in high school, and it was just nice to see the kid clean up. And at that time, he said he was doing security detail. I believe it was out of school is what he told me. But he seemed like he was better. Obviously, that wasn't true. Here's another picture from a party that we had at Brandon's house. That's BRYAN there. He used to be a bigger kid as well. But again, that's him. And then at the same wedding, I'm here, but he's back there. He was sitting at the same table as me and my mother. But he is back there enjoying a drink. I was sitting right next to him. We talked. He seemed fine. My mom sent me the old school yearbook. That was him. BRYAN KOHBERGER. That's him. He went to Pleasant Valley. Graduated with, I think, my friend Christopher, a year younger than me. This is when he nonchalantly decided to make me drive him around the Poconos for heroin, and I had no idea. I thought I was just doing a nice deed because he needed something, and it turns out that he was getting heroin. Sorry, my voice is shaking. I might make a part 2. I probably have to. I don't have a 6-minute feature. I only have a 3-minute feature. I also talk really fast, so I'm sorry. More on this. I don't really know what to say in this situation because it's so fucking crazy. I'm not trying to put any names out there. I'm not trying to get my friends involved, but it's crazy when you sit there and you realize that the person that was in your parents' home in your friend's home. You were in their car. You were in his house. I knew his mom. She was a substitute teacher at Pleasant Valley. It's crazy to think that, I don't know. Again, he obviously no longer has a Facebook, but they still allow you to filter old messages. Here's something. I invited him to a party back in 2014. He seemed fine. It's crazy just what can switch in someone's brain. Again, after the whole heroin incident, I didn't know that he was literally making me drive to get him heroin until Brandon told me. So I messaged him a pretty rotten message just because I was pissed. I didn't know there was fucking heroin in my car. But this was, again, 2013. I was 2 years, graduated from high school. He then said he was in rehab. He would randomly message me after that. This is him mentioning he wanted to study criminal justice. Again, back in 2013, he was already hoping to do that, and then that obviously fell through because he said he went to rehab. But apparently he went back at it, and again, in 2017, that's when it seemed like everything was fine, and he was doing great for himself. So it was kind of crazy that this fucking happened. But yeah, this is also talking about, hanging out with Bryan, chilling with them, and then Brandon said they're like not friends anymore, and this happened a lot because of what he was doing, his addiction, and he had some anger issues. I know he did kickboxing to kind of help with that, but again, I wish I had more pictures. I'm sure I have plenty from MySpace days, but for some reason I cannot get onto my MySpace. When I click to search, it just gives me like broken photos, and I'm sure I had more pictures with him because, again, I did a lot with him. We hiked a mountain by my parents' house together. He mentioned that in one of the messages I had with him. Again, I'm so sorry if this is really fast. I don't really know what to say. This never happened to me before. I really didn't have old friend of a murderer on my 2022 bingo list. So yeah, that's him.
Evan, what all have you been able to uncover?
Well, Nicole, we're starting to get a better picture of BRYAN KOHBERGER through online and other records, but also from someone who says that he knew KOHBERGER, our affiliate in Pennsylvania, speaking with a man who says that some years ago he ran with KOHBERGER on a regular basis. Listen to his reaction to the news that KOHBERGER was arrested and charged for these murders in Moscow, Idaho.
I used to go on night runs with him because, like, I didn't want to go running at night by myself. So I would text him like, "Hey, you want to go for a run?" We go for 6-7 mile runs at night. So like when I saw who it was, I was just in like complete shock. I'm still kind of like shaking knowing about that. Like, it's just unreal to think somebody could actually do that to somebody. Like, it's absolutely like mind-boggling. Like, my adrenaline's still kind of running after finding the information out. So just I feel for the families, and I'm just happy justice can be served now. So.
And we have also learned that KOHBERGER studied criminal justice at an advanced level, having gotten a master's from DeSales University in Pennsylvania in 2022, according to the school. There, he appears to once have posted on Reddit asking for volunteers for a research project where he was studying the criminal mind, and he wanted to know specific things about the emotional and psychological considerations for people who had been convicted of crimes, asking questions in a survey like, why did you choose that victim? What was the first move that you made? How did you leave the scene? So very eerie, knowing he is now accused of going through all those thoughts, having committed 4 murders, according to police. Now, he is currently a PhD candidate in criminal justice at Washington State University in Pullman, which is very close to Moscow, Idaho. A friend telling News Nation that he went to Pleasant Valley High School in the area near the Poconos. This is near that scene where he was arrested this morning. A news article from the local paper and school district documents tell us that he later worked there as a security guard. So a strange background for someone to now be accused of such gruesome crimes. Now, we also were able to confirm through county records out in Idaho that someone of the same name, same age, so it appears to be this suspect Kohberger, had been stopped on a seatbelt violation in August. So if these charges against him are true, that means that he would have at least been in the Moscow, Idaho area at least twice. Nicole?
And Evan, you confirmed that he did receive a master's from DeSales University there in Pennsylvania. That's also where he received his bachelor's degree as well, 2 years prior.
Yeah, so a bachelor's degree in 2020, graduating in 2020 in psychology. Then he went on to study criminal justice criminology for a master's, according to the program for the commencement in May 2022. The school telling us in a statement that he graduated in June 2022, but we were able to find that document as well. And then we know he was continuing his studies in Washington State, really just across the Idaho state line, as a PhD candidate in that same subject, criminology and criminal justice.
Yeah, criminology, criminal justice, and a bachelor's degree in psychology. All very interesting tidbits there. All right, Evan Lambert, live for us in D.C. Thank you.
So this suspect worked as security at Pleasant Valley High School in Pennsylvania and was a security guard. And here is that proof. Here is the request that he made on Reddit, asking for prior criminals to participate in a research project to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. He goes on to ask prior criminals, how did you leave the scene? Before leaving, is there anything else that you did? How did you accomplish your goal? And what were you thinking and feeling? What was the move you made to accomplish your goal? Before making your move, did you approach the victim or target? Why did you choose the victim or target over others? And after arriving, what steps did you take prior to locating the victim or target? These are sick questions that I believe his answers were used in planning and plotting this crime, because this crime was 100% planned. This guy chatted with friends and went out like a regular person, which you often hear. That's what makes it so scary. This was a guy, if you brought him home and you were dating him, your parents would think was well accomplished. This is truly scary. Let's hear what Brian's family had to say about him and their interactions and finding out this news.
Posted, she's live with me now. Dana, you were able to speak with the aunt of this suspect, of Bryan Christopher Kohberger, today. What did welcome, and what did the aunt tell you?
I've actually spoke to two of them, and they were both married to brothers of Michael Kohberger, that's the murder suspect's father. And the one aunt that I spoke to, who a lot of them are in the Las Vegas area, and she said the last time she saw Bryan and his father Michael was about 4 years ago at a funeral out in the Nevada area. And she said that Bryan's affect in general, it wasn't as if he came off, of course, as somebody seemingly outwardly crazy, but she said she noticed that he had a really weird food fetish. And she said it went beyond being vegan. He required his aunt and uncle to buy brand new pots and pans for him to eat out of, because he refused to eat from anything that had meat ever cooked in it. And she said it seemed to be an OCD type of situation. She said otherwise he didn't seem that odd, but I spoke to another aunt by marriage who said that the murder suspect's father, Michael, came from a fairly big family that she said lived very close to the edge. They didn't pay a lot of attention to rules. They were a little bit wild. A couple of the uncles of the murder suspect, she said, served time in jail, but for minor, very minor offenses like gambling or things like that. But I got this sense from both these aunts that the family was pretty odd. And the father's family originally comes from Brooklyn. They later all migrated out to Vegas. And Bryan's father, Michael, is the one that was kind of estranged from the rest of his siblings. And I also heard that he could be kind of difficult with his siblings. And I'm talking now again about the murder suspect's father.
Were they surprised? I mean, these anecdotes are remarkable, but what about their affectation? Were they shocked, dismayed, upset, not surprised? Like, how do they feel about the fact that the person the entire country has been looking for ended up being their family member? Like, how surprised were they about this news that he's the suspect?
Not as surprised as you would think. The one aunt, the one that saw him a few years ago and not talked about his food fetish, said she just heard about it. But she was incredibly calm. She is no longer married to the brother, so perhaps the fact that they're not specifically legally in the family anymore gives them some detachment. The other aunt, I'm the one that broke the news to her, and she was completely matter of fact and calm about the whole thing. They didn't want their names used, which is understandable. But no, I mean, I think if it were anyone I'd known, even if it wasn't a relative, I'd be shocked to my core. They did not seem to be that way to me.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com.
Yeah, this is the
Nancy Liu. She earlier was live in Moscow, Idaho, first in front of the home, later at that press conference held by investigators, now live outside of the suspect's home in Pullman, Washington. So, Nancy, you just spoke with somebody who right outside of that home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the campus apartment of Bryan Kohberger. It is university housing at Washington State. That is the unit number 201G. It is on the left side here. You can see the curtains are pulled, and a Idaho State trooper is posted right outside the door. But they are executing a warrant here. This is a big part of the investigation now. I heard that they arrived here around 7 o'clock this morning. Nothing has been removed from the apartment yet, but I did speak to the neighbor who lives right across the hall. He tells me that Bryan Kohberger moved in, he thinks in August, right before the last semester. They've had about maybe 2 or 3 not run-ins, but they've run into each other a few times, and he said that Bryan Kohberger was very friendly every time, very talkative, and almost just a friendly neighbor. So this apartment across the hall, that neighbor says he's never had any issue with Bryan Kohberger, but now he lives across a crime scene. They're executing a warrant here. This is where Bryan Kohberger lives here at Washington State. We also learned from Moscow police that another search warrant is being executed at Kohberger's office, which, since he's a graduate student, we believe that would be an office on the campus of Washington State University. We've also learned that the halting of the cleaning process at the house, that was ordered by a local court in Latah County. And that is likely because of preserving that scene. And I spoke with a Moscow resident who points out that, unlike other cities, LA, New York, where you have a giant pool of potential jurors in the future, Moscow's really small. It's a town of 25,000 people. So they do have to hold things tighter, keep things closer to the vest, release very little information because it's a very small jury pool that they may have to work with. So that's a very good point made to me by a Moscow resident.
And Nancy, you mentioned the fact that they are executing those search warrants. I don't know if our producer, Scott, if we can try to get that sound that we have from the PIO, the Public Information Officer of Moscow Police. Nancy had a chance to speak with him right after that press conference. If we can work on getting that sound, I'd like our viewers to be able to hear that. But in the interim, Nancy, just talk to us a little bit more about what was revealed in that press conference.
Well, we learned with that interview with the PIO that there are at least 4 search warrants, one at the Pennsylvania home, one here, one at the Washington State office, we believe, and also the car, the white Elantra, which we believe is in Pennsylvania. Police would not confirm the location of that car, but it is being processed now.
All right, Nancy.
I tried to get them to clarify.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. We do have the sound. We're going to go ahead and play that. So let's listen into that.
We're still investigating this. We're still trying to paint that picture and find out more of the answers to the questions that we all have. And so now that we know who this suspect is, that's why we would like the public's help in any information that they have involving this individual can help us potentially answer some of those questions as we continue this investigation.
Can you elaborate on the search for a murder weapon?
Certainly, what I can tell you on the search, okay, we have issued and executed search warrants in the residence that he was located at in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
We have located and are searching a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra.
Mm-hmm.
We had search warrants executed at his residence and place of work in Washington State, and those are still active and a part of the investigation.
Friends commenting that this guy was in their rooms and how they knew him. Here is a ticket that he got in Moscow, Idaho. Failure to appear August 22nd, 2022. Looks like the ticket was, he went to court on 9/16. Failure to use a safety restraint, which is a seatbelt. So the police will need to look into that a little further. Where was that incident when he was pulled over? Here is a chat room where it is believed that he called in to talk about the crimes, and people that knew him, like the girl in the prior TikTok, seem to confirm the voice.
And I've worked in a college town, and I've worked with probably at least 10 Sigma Chi members. And, you know, the one thing that every single one of them I feel like has asked me is, if you were going to kill somebody, how would you get away with it? And I just wonder if maybe this is nothing more than some kid in a fraternity trying to prove himself. And that was it.
So you said you worked with 5 or 6 Sigma Chi kids, and they asked you if you can kill somebody, they can get away with it?
Yeah.
Did I hear that right?
Yeah. And my God, I know that's a thing that just like maybe people say, trying to like have interesting conversation, but like just in my head, it's like it's always been these dudes that were in the fraternity. And so it makes me wonder if it's a thing that's in their like culture, that they ask to see how smart you are and whatever, and what kind of answer you come up with, and someone took it too far.
Oh wow! What kind of dudes would ask you that?
Well,
that's crazy as shit, man. That's an outrageous statement, man. I mean, I'd write their names down.
Yeah, man. Like you know, I like horror movies and all that kind of stuff, and I'll watch those kind of things. But like when someone like in person says some stuff like that, it's kind of like jarring. It's like, what? Why are you saying something like that?
Yeah, that's man. Who said that to you?
As I stated a few weeks ago in my prior video, I always felt that this person was very much into crime. I didn't know that they'd have a degree in it. He has kind of taken on the personas, I believe, of people that he's been studying. It sounds like he had some difficulties in his teens and got involved with drug use and had some real mental health issues going on, some internal struggles that I don't know if they were acknowledged by the family or realized at that time. This was a highly intelligent young man, and this is just really, really shocking that we're seeing this day and age again, kind of a repeat. These people all have these eccentric minds that do these horrible things. Ted Bundy, he had a degree in law as well, in criminal justice. He was able to pass his bar exam. So that's not terribly shocking. What we're seeing here is a video of police at his parents' residence going into the home around the time of the arrest. I actually lived in Pennsylvania for a while, not far from here. And in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of these communities in the Pocono region where it was a big boom in the 90s. So you see a lot of bigger houses and nice land. It's quiet. He's in the Stroudsburg area here at the police department. And they're basically just showing like where the court is and where the prison facility is. I guess this area is kind of small. So the prison and the jail are all in one, all in the same unit, where typically you'll have a jail and then prison is for people who have been sentenced. Stroudsburg is about 50 minutes or so from Allentown, and also about 55 minutes to Scranton, so you're kind of in the halfway point. Very quiet area, has definitely grown from the 90s till now. I'm dating myself, but what a beautiful area. Lots of people moved there from the New York City metro to kind of get that breathing room, give their kids a backyard, better schools, and a safe place to grow up. So Brian's family's originally from Brooklyn. I imagine they had the same vision for their family. He lived in a gated community, which is very common in that area. Lots of little private lakes. Really nice. Close-knit communities. These people must be in like total shock. You can see the gate there. That's the gatehouse. So you had to have a code to get in there. Couldn't just wander in. And that looks like the correctional facility. Kind of all have that look to them. Yep, there's the gates and the barbed wire. And he is behind those walls where, thank God, because this person would have definitely done this again or something else. Further up in this video, we're going to get into his Instagram, which is really and truly disturbing. I mean, I believe that he would have carried out a mass murder. He had so many weapons on pages he was following. So many weapons and tactical gear and sick, disturbing content. You don't know what's in the mind of other people. And this person was obviously struggling with some very dark, deep-seated anger and disturbing thoughts. I'd love to hear from his family at some point. You can see at the bottom of the screen where he lives with the red, and to where Scranton is at the top of the map. From between his house to Scranton is a lot of little private lake communities there. Some are seasonal, some are year-round. A lot of people even make the commute. There was a time I lived in Scranton, actually, and I commuted to the Pocono area. Let's hear from Nancy Grace at this time on her take with her panel on this developing news.
with us no more. And another Fox News alert. There you see him, everybody. 3 a.m. this morning, a SWAT team swoops down on a Pennsylvania home to arrest the prime suspect in the murders of 4 beautiful Idaho University students. BRYAN Christopher Koberger, age 28, PhD student, Washington State University, studying criminal justice of all things, hiding out, where else? At Mommy's house. I'm Nancy Grace. I'm in for Laura Ingram tonight. This is a special edition of the Ingram Angle. Wow, this is some alert. After 47 long days of suffering from the 4 victims' families, finally an arrest. Standing by right now at Pennsylvania, outside the CI Correctional Institute, where Koberger is being housed tonight. Laura, what can you tell us?
Hi, Nancy. Well, right. We are outside of the Monroe County Correctional Facility, and this is where he is going to be calling home for the next few days at least. And you mentioned that he was arrested where we believe to be at his parents' house. It's just a few short miles from where I am standing now. But tonight, he sits here behind me inside this jail that holds about 400 inmates, some of them maximum security inmates, others minimum security. Of course, we believe he's over on the max side.
That facility is 26 minutes, 17.3 miles from his home. As you can see, Scranton is much further. It's 50 minutes and 41.3 miles. Stroudsburg is much closer to his neighborhood.
But let's take a look at that mugshot once again that we've been showing you all day. The 28-year-old was taken into custody before the sun came up by the Pennsylvania State Police at that home on the southeast side of Scranton, Pennsylvania, arrested on what they called a fugitive from justice warrant. And despite having an apartment in the state of Washington near the crime scene, his registered address is right here in Pennsylvania. And when it comes to a possible motive, we're all waiting to hear what that is. Here is what investigators in Idaho had to say about that today.
That is part of the investigation, and that will come out as we continue the investigation. But what we still ask is for people to continually send us things in the tip line. We are still looking for more information. We're still trying to build that picture, just like we have stated all along. We're putting all the pieces together, and that will help.
As they look for more tips, I was able to find someone who stated they sold this individual a Spyderco knife on Facebook Marketplace for $350. This is the knife that they alleged to have sold him. I could not find any records on any other pay accounts.
Now, BRYAN Koberger faces 4 counts of first-degree murder in the November 13th stabbing deaths of those 4 young University of Idaho students. He is also charged with felony burglary, which police say is for entering the home with an intent to commit murder.
We know where he was in 2020, 2022, but my question is, where was he in 2019? Was he perhaps looking at schools, or does he have friends or family in the Moscow area? Because this disturbing video is rather scary and has a lot of coincidences. The suspect in the image does look a lot like BRYAN, and what do we see? A white Elantra.
On camera, when it comes to crimes, security video is very helpful to police. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Keith Havens.
And I'm Devin Truby in for Ana Velasquez. But here's a case where Moscow police say it's a little on the unique side. A person caught on camera allegedly stealing the camera. In the early morning hours of September 22nd, a University of Idaho student walking home down the alley near Ashbury Street stopped, looked right at the security camera, and then took it right off the wall. According to the police report, he used this Celtics trash cam to climb up. You can hear the metal can being flipped as he stands on it. The person took items that looked similar to this, a security camera and a solar panel.
In this situation, the victim was able to work with his neighbors and identify the suspect.
After neighbors identified the suspect, police had a talk with him. The student claimed he, quote, blacked out and didn't remember taking the camera. He also said he had no idea where the items were because when he woke up, they weren't there. So the owner of the camera came up with a solution.
Arrangements to have the young man pay for the item. He felt like that was a good resolution to that situation and not go down the criminal route. And as the victim, that's certainly his prerogative.
Captain Roger Lanier says more citizens are starting to get their own home security systems, and this case brings up an important tip if you are thinking about making a purchase.
Make sure it records to a remote server and not in that camera itself.
In this case, the owner was still able to view the video with the camera gone and show neighbors to identify the suspect. The department tells us this issue was resolved and no criminal charges were ever pressed.
I am going to try to email public records and see, since they know who the victim and the perpetrator was in that case, if that is connected in any way to Mr. Kohlberger. Police may have made the connection this way.
Now, we've been talking about that white Elantra. We know that law enforcement recovered a white Elantra right here in Monroe County today, which was the subject of that nationwide search. The car will most likely hold critical clues if it is the same one that was seen driving near the crime scene in Moscow, Idaho after the time of the quadruple murders. A Pennsylvania neighbor near where the arrest took place was clearly shaken today by the news that the suspect in these grisly crimes was captured here.
It was surprised. I did not expect that something like this can happen in such a quiet neighborhood. I specifically moved from New York to the quiet area, but I didn't expect that things like this happen to be safe for my future family that I'm planning to have. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, today investigators were just 15 minutes away from the Idaho crime scene, raiding the suspect's home in Pullman, Washington, where he was a graduate student pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State. We've been talking about that. Kohlberger is currently being held without bond, and he is expected to have a hearing on Tuesday. We've been talking about that extradition process. We'll see what happens. He could waive that process, but again, he'll be back in court on Tuesday as we learn more through these hours and days. Nancy?
Laura Engel joining us right outside the CI Correctional Institute where Kohlberger is being held. Got a couple of questions for you, Laura. And again, thank you for braving the elements, for being with us. Number one, you said the car was found there in Monroe. All right. It's the white Elantra we've all been looking for. Where in Monroe was the car found? Let me guess. Parked outside Mommy's house?
Oh, it's a great question, and because nobody knew this was happening at 3 a.m., right? There was not a camera there. And this actually, when he was arrested, he was in a private community. So it's kind of a gated community off of a 2-lane road. So nobody knew this was happening. Nobody has seen where the car came from. It actually could be anywhere in the county. And they said it was a white Elantra. They didn't say it was the white Elantra, but nonetheless, they found a white Elantra. They found it here in the county the same day, apparently, that they made this arrest. So we're waiting to find out, if this is in fact the one they were looking for, where they took it, and when they're going to start processing it, and of course, what they'll find inside.
Laura, stay with us. Also joining us there in Moscow, Dan Springer, Fox News correspondent. Dan, I understand that right now, as we speak, cops are tearing apart Kohlberger's Pullman apartment. Don't you know this guy? He's so fastidious. He's getting his PhD. I've read a lot about him. I've been researching this guy. You know he had to leave some kind of a trail in that apartment.
Well, Nancy, here's the interesting thing. The police in Pullman today, the campus police over in Pullman, Washington, said that he finished off his degree or his semester at the Washington State University, which is about 8 miles away from us here in Moscow. So that means that after the murders, if he's the guilty party, he went back to that apartment and stayed there and finished school for at least a few more weeks before that term was up. But the announcement of the arrest was made behind me at City Hall here in Moscow, Idaho at 6 hours ago. And as you can imagine, there was relief throughout this entire city. They have never seen anything like a quadruple murder in Moscow before. This is an especially important day for the families of those 4 victims who were butchered in that rental property just off of campus as they slept nearly 7 weeks ago. And now those families are finally getting closer to getting some justice. The murders of Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin shocked this small college town of 25,000 people. It touched off a massive investigation. Video quickly surfaced from a food truck the night of the murders that showed Kaylee and Maddie just a couple hours before they were killed. Police had thousands of tips, but apparently few good leads. Dozens of local, state, and federal cops have been working the case right through the holidays, but just in recent days, they must have locked in on a suspect. I'm told by a source it is very difficult to get a judge to sign a no-knock first-degree murder warrant to be executed out of state. You have to have a lot of compelling evidence, and no one is happier about the arrest than the parents of the victims. We spoke with Kaylee's dad by phone. A biohazard team was cleaning up today at the house where the murders took place. They were to begin that cleanup, return the house back to the owner, but that work was stopped after news of the arrest. And Nancy, this is also a very important day, obviously, for the University of Idaho. This is a school that was rocked by this quadruple homicide of those 4 students. And for them to get beyond this arrest had to happen. And now they can try to get back to some semblance of normal at this college town and get those kids back on campus and feeling safe again. Nancy?
Dan, thank you for being with us, and please don't move. We got a lot of questions for you, but I want to bring in the panel. We've got an all-star panel joining us tonight to make sense of everything we know. But first, I want to go straight out to Chris Swecker, former FBI Assistant Director, 24 years with the FBI Special Agent. Now Chris Swecker, Attorney at Law. 24 years in the FBI? Okay, you've been around the block, no offense, but I got to talk to you about a couple of things. Really? This is a guy who's getting his PhD in criminal justice. And where does he go? Home to mommies. How many times have I had a sheriff pull a defendant out from under the bed at mommy's house? So if he's hiding out at mommy's house, Chris, you know the car is probably parked right in front of the driveway.
Yeah, I think it was actually, and I think this shows a little bit of an arrested development, if you will. This guy reminds me so much of Ted Bundy, and people have made that comparison, throughout this whole investigation. But a guy who can act normal, be a PhD candidate. Bundy was a law student and eventually passed the bar, and walk amongst us, and then just morph into a quadruple homicidal maniac and do these horrible things that he did. So he's the type of guy, I think, that has that profile of maybe a misfit, maybe on the margins of society, not accepted, and maybe he was, came in contact with one of these 4 victims and just got rejected or just you had a bad experience with them.
You know what? I want to talk about the dichotomy of what you just said, and it's like Two-Face. All right, you've got a guy who is meticulously and fastidiously achieving his PhD in criminal studies.
Sales University in Center Valley, Pennsylvania tonight. Andy, that's where the suspect recently got a master's degree. His field of study there now seems an eerie one.
Yeah, Brian, that's right. He completed his undergraduate studies here at DeSales University in 2020, and then he received his master's in criminal justice here just this year.
DeSales University releasing a statement today about former student 28-year-old BRYAN KOHBERGER, seen here graduating with a Master of Arts in Criminal Justice. KOHBERGER was arrested this morning on 4 first-degree murder charges for the stabbing deaths of 4 Idaho University students as they slept in their beds on November 13th. DeSales University acknowledging the arrest and his affiliation with the university as an undergrad graduating in 2020 and a graduate student completing his degree in June 2022. His name is listed here in the 2022 commencement program. DeSales saying this in part in a statement Quote, as a Catholic Silesian community, we are devastated by this senseless tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims' families during this difficult time.
They also reported that to the Daily Beast, where it's seen in writing their condolences to the families. This is a Catholic school, a private school. It wasn't cheap, and it seems like he was raised in a Catholic household.
I managed to somehow get my mitts on a questionnaire he was sending to violent criminals, asking them to detail, Chris Swecker, for him, their emotions and their thoughts and their decision-making during the crime. I'm talking about murder, rape, mutilation. He was obsessed with this to the point that he immersed himself into it and became a killer himself. I believe that's going to be the theory. So he's not a maniac out of control, but yet he is. Have you seen this during your years at the FBI?
Absolutely. I mean, you have these people that, again, they can appear normal at times, and then they can fly into these rages and kill just for the sake and the thrill of killing. And and it raises the question, Nancy, of is this the first time? And I think that is one of the reasons the Moscow police chief was casting about, looking for more information about this person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think they have enough to make an arrest, enough probable cause, but they're still building their case, and they're still trying to figure out motive and everything there is to know about this person going back to his childhood. You know, my concern is and was that he would do it again.
We've learned a lot about this guy and his childhood. To Jonathan Gilliam joining us, former FBI Special Agent, former Navy SEAL, author of Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. Jonathan, thank you for being with us. I want to tell you, and please, everybody on the panel, jump in, all right? If you have an idea or a thought or a lead, tell me. Don't wait for me to call on you like a school teacher. Jonathan Gilliam, this is what we know. This guy was very socially awkward. Now get this, he was so fastidious. He's described as being an overzealous vegan, to the point that he made his parents throw out their pots and pans that had ever touched meat. The high heat bake cycle wasn't enough for him. They had to throw out their pots and pans and buy new ones for him to cook his vegan meals in. Now, think about it. Think about it. Do I care about his pots and pans? No, I don't. But what that tells me is he has an acute attention for detail. He went into this house, I'm telling you, Jonathan, with the intent to kill, just like the burglary charge says. He didn't go into rape. He didn't go into steal. He went into kill. He had this thing planned out.
Right, and I also think what you just pointed out actually points out how much of a manipulator this individual is and how focused he was on whatever desire he has. This is a heightened desire when you're that concerned with the pots and pans that your parents are using to cook your food, that you're going to make them throw those out. That shows me that there's a pattern of behavior here. And I wouldn't doubt, as the information starts to come out and people start to realize who he is, just like Ted Bundy, you're going to see a history of violent and odd behavior, deviant behavior, to the point where I'm still not convinced that this is the first time this individual is killed. And I would think, based on looking at the profile of this guy and this investigation or this thing that he was doing with these prisoners or these criminals, it was as if he was living vicariously through them. So that may have been a trigger for him to take fantasy into reality. But I still believe this is most likely not the first time he killed.
Well, just what you just said. I'm going to pick up on that, Jonathan Gilliam. Go to Brian Foley, former homicide detective, Connecticut State Police. Brian, I've dealt with so many killers, I can't even count them. Literally hundreds and hundreds, all right, over 10 years prosecuting in inner city Atlanta. I wanted to know the facts. I didn't have to prove the motive, but I would like to present it to the jury. But this guy is asking violent criminals, killers, rapists, child molesters, what were you thinking when you pulled the trigger? What were you thinking when you sunk the knife in? He's right. Gilliam is right. He was getting involved, enmeshed, obsessed with the details of crime.
Yeah, you know, psych majors always seem to scare me for some reason or another. And, you know, what really got me was the lack of emotion to be able to kill 4 people in an apartment and move around so quietly at night. That you know, knife homicides in general are usually very emotional, very loud, and very violent. But this went, to not wake up people downstairs, to not wake others up in the process of it, that shows me a lack of emotion on his part. What I also want to know is the number of, without getting too gory here, the number of stab wounds per victim. Typically when you're targeting one person, that person will have a lot more stab wounds than the ones that aren't targeted. I don't think we're going to see that here. Like I said, I think there was a lack of emotion. I think this is a severe psychological
brought up
disorder.
Something really smart, Foley. Were these girls targeted? Of course, there's a possibility that Ethan, the boy, the young man, was targeted, but it's most likely one of the girls. Cheryl McCollum is joining me, director of the Cold Case Research Institute, Crime Scene Tech. You can find her at coldcasecrimes.org. Cheryl, you know this guy who's so fastidious over the pots and pans, and what about the parents doing it? Can you imagine if one of my twins said, hey, Mom, throw out all the pots and pans, I want new ones? That would not happen.
Well,
but
again, it shows he's able to. But it shows he's able to manipulate them. Even as a 30-year-old, his biggest concern is a pot or a pan that's touched a piece of meat and he can't use it. But again, Nancy, we've talked about Bundy several times tonight, but I'm going to jump on that bandwagon too and say if you have ever heard Kathy Kleiner speak, and she is one of the survivors from the child mega house, she says that Bundy never said a word. I don't believe this person did either. I believe he came in, he was laser focused on what he was going to do, he committed those crimes, and he walked away all in silence.
You know, Joe Scott Morgan joining me, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, author of Blood Beneath My Feet, and host of a hit podcast, Body Bags, with Joe Scott Morgan. Joe Scott, I agree with what one of our guests said earlier. A knife killing is different from every other killing, and you've worked, thousands of homicide scenes, as have I. You are in such close contact with your victim. It's not like you're a sniper at 300 feet and you take a shot and it's all over. It's not antiseptic and sterile. He was up close and personal with every one of these girls, and according to one of the dads, Keely had gouge wounds on her body. How long do you think he spied on them? I mean, look at him. Can't you just see those eyes looking through your window, watching their moves, seeing where they were going, what time they'd come home?
Yeah, he had taken his time, and I think they used the word targeting quite a bit here over the course of these past few weeks. I think that he did target them. This home was on a cul-de-sac, Nancy. There was only one way to get in there. He was aware of who was living there. And when he got inside with these victims, he took his time with them and attacked them individually. Keep in mind, we had 2 couples. Both sets were co-sleeping. They were in the same beds with one another. And so he would move from victim to victim. And the blood, in this case, the blood will in fact tell, because we're going to learn a lot about sequencing here relative to DNA and physical evidence as he moves with this knife from victim A to victim B to C and D and so forth. We're going to have an increased amount of DNA from other victims deposited finally on that final victim. And then, of course, the big find here, Nancy, is going to be that car in his apartment.
Yeah, no way he got rid of all that blood evidence. He'd have to use black swan or muriatic acid to get rid of all that DNA. There's got to be a trace in that car. Guys, stay with us, because when we come back, we've managed to track down people that know him and what they had to say about him being a bully, socially awkward, and I quote, mean-spirited.
Joy that we've had in 7 days, because it really is. You can't even smile when you have this over your head, and feels like a little bit of weight has been relieved and things are on the right track and we're moving in the right direction.
You're hearing the voice of Steve Gonsalves. That is Kelly's dad. And can you imagine, you spend your whole life trying to help your children. You pour in all your money, all your love, all your energy, your hopes, your dreams. Guy that stabbed 4 beautiful college students. Stay with us, because when we come back, he managed to track down people that know him and what they beginning of the ordeal these families will be facing. Joining me right now, Laura Ingalls is joining us. Laura, what can you tell me about, number one, where you are, what you see, what you know from that, and also I really want to hear about the defendant, the suspect's family, about where they live. You said it was a gated community. I want to hear all about it. Go, tell me.
Right. All right, so right now we are outside the Monroe County Correctional Facility. This is the local jail here in this county where there's about 400 inmates, both maximum and minimum security inmates here. I went up to the front door earlier. It was locked. I tried to get in to see if maybe we could put in a request. They told me absolutely not. He will be here for the next few days while he waits for that next court appearance on Tuesday. It was just a few miles away from here where he was arrested early this morning around 3 a.m. I think we have some video to show you of the area. Our Fox News digital team was over there earlier today, and what we've been explained is that it's a gated community in the sense is that it kind of has barricades, not those big fancy gates that we see typically when you hear gated community, but certainly something that is blocked off, it is private. You can't just mosey on in there. So they kept the public out, the reporters out, the police did when news broke today of this arrest. This is what we have been told is a well-respected family in the area, and the suspect in this case, people don't really like to come out and start talking about people. They get scared, but there have been a few people who have come forward to some local outlets. We're going to have a story published on foxnews.com very soon about some people that say, look, when we first met him, he was a nice guy, and that's what you always hear, right? But then in later years, in the later school years, at the end of high school, things started to change, and some people said that he was a bully. Some people said that he was aggressive. Others said that, he was starting to get cut out of social groups because of his aggressive actions. And many people said he's extremely smart. This was a very smart guy, according to his educational resume that you've been talking about, but always somebody that wanted to talk about how he knew everything. This, according to people who have come forward and started talking about his mannerisms. He's a tall guy, he's thin. We will learn more. Hopefully we'll get some more pictures. We'll have that mugshot, and then hopefully we'll see him on Tuesday in court and give you a better description of that. But right now, this is a very quiet community. Many people, we played that soundbite for you earlier of a guy that moved here from New York City feeling like he wanted to be somewhere safe and secure where bad things didn't happen, and it didn't happen here. But the guy that has been hunted for 7 weeks was found here in this county. We'll learn more as we're here in the coming days. Nancy?
Sam, can you show me that aerial shot again of the defendant's family home? I want to see that. There's a lot of snow. There you go. And they're big, huge homes on wooded lots. I mean, I'm starting to suspect a silver spoon in somebody's mouth. Look at that. Now, how did this guy end up a suspect in a quadruple murder, one of the worst slay scenes that have been seen in the state of Idaho? It has affected the lawmen and women that handle the scene so acutely that they have actually had to get counseling after working that crime scene. How did that happen? Another thing, Sam, if you could put up cut 10. This is from two friends of Kohberger, Nick McLaughlin and Thomas Arntz, stating that Kohberger always wanted to, quote, fight somebody, bullying people. We started cutting him out of our friend group because he was a 100% a different person. He was mean-spirited, a bully. I never thought he would do something like that, but at the same time, it doesn't really surprise me. Wow, that's telling me a lot. Neighbors, we understand, state that they only saw him going to and from the mailbox. That's all they knew about him. Straight back out to Dan Springer joining us on location in Moscow. Dan, I understand that. Excuse me, Sam, what? Okay, going to the panel. I understand that the authorities were just about to clean out the home. Take a listen to our SOT 8. Police revealed the cleanup of the murder house was starting and then called off by a court order. Can you play that for me, Sam?
This morning, and you told us that the remediation would begin today. It was suddenly stopped. Can you tell us why?
Yes. The house cleanup has been halted, and that came by a legal request from the court.
Joining me right now, former homicide detective with Oceanside Police Department in California, host of The Interview Room, Chris McDonough. Chris, thank you for being with us. What do you make of what we are learning now about the suspect?
So, Nancy, I think a couple of points to consider real fast is what we call pre-incident behavior. And what the authorities have done is, sent the message out into the community and across the country for any type of behaviors that this individual may have engaged in. And so that's critical to understand, because that will help us put together some of the behavioral aspects in relationship to why this guy did what he did. And so I think a piece of this big puzzle is going to be his academic choice and his studies there. Who were his mentors that worked with him through his master's program? What were his interests that he would reflect that back onto the suspect here? So those types of things help us understand a little bit more about how this guy thinks, and that's going to be critical coming over the next couple of days.
That's really interesting. Joe Scott Morgan, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, and I were discussing that just before we went to air. Because, Joe Scott, when I went and got my advanced degree at NYU in criminal law specifically, I got to steer what I was interested in. All right? I would be very curious, as Chris is pointing out, what was his interest? I mean, we know about asking violent felons, hey, what were you thinking about when you raped that lady or when you committed that murder? I mean, he was a little too into it.
Yeah, really fascinating to me, Nancy. Out of all of the schools he could have chosen, and Washington State is a fine school, why did he choose Washington State for his PhD studies? We know he was at DeSales, but here's the key. Who was he going to study under at Washington State University? That individual that would have mentored him there, what's their area of interest? Did he have a PhD supervisor at this early point in his academic career as a PhD student? And people talk about digital footprints all of the time. We leave all of these signals behind. In academia, you cut a wide swath here. He will have published papers. He will have worked on research, and it's going to be very fascinating to kind of track him through his entire academic career relative to this. What has he produced? What meetings has he been to? Who is he engaged with? All along this kind of continuum with him in academia, and finally landing him there in Pullman at Washington State University. This is something we need to keep a close eye on, I think.
Guys, when we come back, we're going to hear it from the experts from the FBI and homicide detectives. How did they do it exactly? How did they find this guy? How did they make the arrest? And what about this guy's social media? Somehow, cops match up DNA at the scene to this white Hyundai Elantra. It's got to be DNA that they found at the right place, because this was a real party house. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not a felony. College students having a good time. A lot of people in and out. It had to be DNA in the right place, like on the bed sheets, on the victims, on the doorknob, mixed in blood. So how did they do it? How did they effect this arrest?
Well, Nancy, as you know, there's two types of trace evidence that will specifically identify a person, and that's fingerprints and DNA. Now, the fingerprints have been around for a long time. I'm sure it's likely that they got fingerprints there. My sources tell me that they did get some good DNA profiles, but this person has never been arrested, so he is not in the DNA database, which is the other way you identify a killer. But what I believe happened is they used forensic genealogy, which is diving into the commercial DNA databases that are out there that are available to any one of us who wants to pay the money and look at our own genealogy. And those databases have built up a pretty good bank of DNA profiles all the way through the family line. And I think in this case, it's highly likely that that's what happened here, is they were able to get into the commercial databases and make a match, at least to a relative. And that led them to this person. I don't think the car led them to it. I think the car was incidental. When they showed up at the scene, the car happened to be there, which was a confirmation, if you will. But I think DNA played a significant role here.
And when you
know
think
what,
about
Nancy, is
it,
really important to me.
Jump in. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I think it's really important that you've got DNA from somebody, and when they get a name and they look to see what vehicle this person owns, it's the same vehicle they've been looking for. And what's imperative to me is these law enforcement officers weren't waiting just for the evidence to come back. They were actively searching for this car the whole time. And that's just extraordinary police work to me.
You know, there's another thing, and you're right, Cheryl McCollum. Jonathan Gilliam, what about this? We all went to college. Do you remember all the stickers and licenses you had to have to park anywhere on campus? I mean, his school there at Pullum at Washington State University was 12 miles away, give or take a mile or two, 12 miles away from the murder scene. Don't you think that Washington State University had his car on file? He was there in student housing.
Yeah, most likely. And by the way, I was one of those weird psychology majors when I was in college at University of Arkansas at Little Rock before I went into law enforcement. But, you know, I think that all these things, what you're seeing here, Nancy, is the way that evidence starts to come into play. Once there's a break in an investigation, because you can only go as fast as the evidence comes in. So once you get a break, you start to see things just fall into place, and literally pieces of the puzzle just start to appear. One thing I want to go back on, though, with Laura Ingraham, when she said earlier and was talking about how he became progressively more abusive and a bully, as he was described by his friends. I think now that I'm hearing that, we could probably go back to his childhood and how he started to develop, which we've seen in other psychopaths. And I think what you're probably going to see is that there was a pattern of behavior that led up into the bullying, then that led up into a more deviant behavior where his desire became greater and greater for domination. And so what you saw in that house was a satiation of the ultimate desire of these types of psychopaths. So I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how long they lived in that house around that area in Pennsylvania, but I wouldn't be surprised if they found the carcasses of animals and even potentially bodies somewhere along the way, because he may be a bully to the people that he knows he can push it so far before he gets in trouble, but it's what he does in secret.
So from yesterday to today, they have confirmed that DNA evidence and confirming ownership of the white Hyundai Elantra scene that they've been looking for was how they connected this perpetrator to the crime. He was also being tracked across country, from what I've read. Mary Kohberger, who is this perpetrator's mother, according to public records and was obtained by an article by Heavy, wrote a letter to the editor regarding the Uvalde, Texas mass shooting. She wrote she found herself wrestling with which actions need to be taken, whether the kids should come first or the guns. She also mentioned about counseling for children and mental health interventions. I'm wondering if she saw some of the same traits from the Uvalde killer with her own son. And when I get into his Instagram, you'll see why. Kohberger did have friends. However, they've started talking about how he changed. He was described as down to earth and was formerly overweight. He seemed to have graduated early junior year. At the start of senior year, they said he was thinner than a rail and he got very aggressive. And he started taking boxing classes. Said he always wanted to fight somebody and he was bullying people. Because of that, the friends cut them off from their friends group because they thought he was a totally different person. They said he went to Pleasant Valley High School before going to the vocational school there. Apparently at that time he wanted to take classes related to heating and air conditioning work. He also took criminal justice to potentially become an officer. He was never able to achieve those dreams, and his friendship ended when he started reaching out to his friend's girlfriend. His weight loss may have contributed to some of those dietary changes that we've heard of, but there are a lot more things that we'd have to consider with someone in this mindset. With this new indictment comes more questions than answers today, but we are going to get all of the answers in the future. Here is a look into the mind of this person, and I noticed family members on his Instagram page. So did they not see what he was following? There is a relative, and these are some of the things that he's following, which are extremely disconcerting and may explain why his mother was so involved in looking into the Uvalde shooting. What's worse is, this is Advanced Home Solutions. This is a company out of LA, and they do home remodeling. What were his intentions? To get into home remodels, to be able to stalk victims, or was that related to his prior air conditioning experience? Nothing else on his Instagram shows he had any other interest except for things of a violent nature. Extremely violent and deviant. Guns, tactical gear, knives, special tape, masks, bloodshed, horror, graphic images. I've tried to eliminate most of the things, as no one needs to see this content. And I urge anyone, if they go on there and try to watch the video he has, it's beyond disturbing. I turned it off. I couldn't even stand to watch it. It was so graphic. This person right here, especially in this photo, you can see there's something very wrong in that mind. As of today, he is waiving his extradition, but challenges his conviction. A public defender who was not named from Monroe County, Pennsylvania, said that Kohberger is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible. Very interesting. This is going to be a rather interesting case, and I really wonder in his studies if he has experimented with crimes in the past. I did briefly look into some missing persons in the area of Pennsylvania that he lived. There are many, and there is a high drug area in the city of Allentown, which is not far away. However, one case kind of stood out to me. It could in fact have no relation whatsoever. However, there is a missing woman from the Pocono area there who went missing and just disappeared beyond a trace. It was about 39 minutes from the suspect's home and about the same from the school where he attended. I will link that story in my description. There it is from the college, 51 minutes, 42 miles. This would have been right before he would have left to the Washington area. This woman basically disappeared without a trace. They have no leads in this case and have never found her or anything related to her disappearance. Given the totality of everything that I've covered under this very lengthy video, I think we've gotten into the mind of Bryan and his friends, his family, And we can kind of piece together that he had some real deep internal struggles. He was without a doubt crime obsessed, which is spot on with the video done previously. He admits that in the call in with the TikTok videos. He also sent out that questionnaire to get some more insight in his planning stages of committing crimes. We don't know how long he's been on this kick of homicide. I don't know if he had any prior romantic relationships. I haven't been able to find one at this time. We don't know about his propensity to violence of him carrying it out, other than his meanness and him being aggressive and taking classes to curb that aggression. His drug history certainly is a red flag as well. I'm not a doctor, however, I've lived a lot of life. I'm a parent. I can gather that this was an individual who had trouble with relationships. He seems to not find where he fits in. And unfortunately, where he found the most comfort was in this crime community and with whatever twisted thoughts were in his mind. He was able to manifest those into reality. Those of you who've been with me for a little bit know that I try to stick to the facts. I do take some discussion into account, and I am going to be shocked if he did not have contact with these girls on some level. Early on, I came across a post on the Mad Greek of a student who lived in Washington who would go there and study and talk to the girls. I'm wondering if he did some of the same. We know he was in Moscow. So did he eat at the restaurant and manage to meet these girls? Maybe he met them first, or maybe he picked the house first and then studied the occupants within it and started doing his research on how he'd carry out this murder. But it was for sure planned. If he did want to mimic that 112 Ocean from the Amityville crime, he may have sought the house out just by its address. I find it more than a coincidence that the addresses are almost the same. The crime happened on the same dates and time, just different years. We're going to find a lot more disturbing evidence and facts about this person who seemed to not have a positive connection with anything. He seemed to be living a dark world in a very dark existence. And unfortunately, 4 people lost their lives. This has affected many, many more lives. And now he's ruined his own. I don't know that he would have been connected to Little Buddy, but there is a sick individual who murdered this dog, and that case also needs to be solved. If you know anything regarding the dog, please contact Moscow Police 208-883-7180, or if you know anything about BRYAN KOHBERGER and maybe you've seen him around town, maybe he ate where you work, anything at all, please call it in. Please consider subscribing to my channel, and I thank you so much for watching and sticking with this video as it was pretty lengthy, but I hope you got a lot of good information. Be safe.